What if I told you that there are ancient tales whispered through time, suggesting that the story of Jesus might not be confined to the Middle East alone? What if he had traveled to the Americas, spreading his message to indigenous cultures long before European explorers arrived? There are myths and stories that suggest the possibility. These stories come from a range of cultures, many of which describe a figure with striking similarities to Jesus, teaching love, wisdom, and spiritual awakening. In this video, we will explore the myths, the historical context associated with them, as well as the similarities between the teachings of Jesus and the wisdom of the indigenous cultures of the Americas. So, did he cross the sea, as some ancient myths tell us, and do lasting good among the New World's natives? Or is this nothing more than a myth that arose from a borrowing of similar spiritual thoughts on different continents? Join us as we discover the threads of this mystery, which brings together ancient history, legend, and wisdom. Throughout history, myths have carried profound truths. Among them, the idea of Jesus Christ visiting the Americas stands out as an intriguing blend of faith, legend, and spiritual wonder. Could the teachings of Jesus have crossed the vast oceans to touch ancient North American civilizations? This question tells us to explore the connections between cultures, faiths, and the shared longing for divine guidance. The Book of Mormon's account. The Book of Mormon, printed in 1830, is a pillar for this myth. This Book of Latter-day Saints is a history of the people of America, which was written on metal plates and preserved for centuries. Compiled from several sources, it includes spiritual teachings and histories of civilizations, such as the Nephites and Jaredites, who lived in the Americas. This event is recorded as a transformative moment in the history of these peoples. One striking narrative from the Book of Mormon describes Christ's appearance to the Nephites following his resurrection. According to the account, Jesus performed miracles, such as healing the sick, taught eternal truths like the importance of unity and rejecting contention, saying, "He that hath the spirit of contention is not of me." 3 Nephi 11:29, and organized his church by calling disciples to continue his teachings. This depiction mirrors the Christ of the New Testament, but extends his reach to a new land, suggesting his mission was universal, transcending geography and culture. Indigenous legends of a great teacher. Throughout the Americas, indigenous peoples have long spoken of a divine figure who brought wisdom, peace, and moral teachings. This is a cultural world figure, also known as the Great Teacher or the White Prophet, who transcends cultural boundaries, representing a universal archetype of divine enlightenment. Quetzalcoatl is one of the most interesting figures in the search for Jesus' possible links to the Americas. Quetzalcoatl is displayed as being a divine teacher who brought wisdom as well as spiritual awareness to his people. His life story bears remarkable resemblance to the narrative of Jesus. In fact, Quetzalcoatl was believed to have sacrificed himself to ensure the health of his followers, and his return would mean that a new age of peace plus spiritual awakening would arrive. Could Quetzalcoatl be a manifestation of the divine energy that incarnated as Jesus in the New Testament? The parallels between these stories force us to consider a hidden truth. Divine wisdom manifests in various forms across cultures, always guiding humanity toward greater understanding. In addition to Quetzalcoatl, other indigenous deities, such as Viracocha, Inca, and Kukulkan, Maya, share striking similarities with the figure of Jesus Christ. These deities are associated with creation, wisdom, sacrifice, and renewal traits that echo the core of teachings of Christianity. The similarities between these figures raise the possibility that the Christ-like archetype may be a universal manifestation of divine wisdom, appearing in different cultures under various names and forms. How these myths emerged and evolved over time. Now, the emergence of these myths, whether through the Book of Mormon or indigenous legends, must be understood within the context of both divine revelation and historical development. The Book of Mormon presents the timeline of Jesus' visit to the Americas within a specific historical framework, AD 34-35, when the Nephites and Lamanites experienced a transformative encounter with the resurrected Christ. This event is recorded as the climax of Christ's teachings in the Americas. The book itself was first translated by Joseph Smith in 1829 to 1830, adding a modern layer to the ongoing dialogue of spiritual awakening across time. Simultaneously, indigenous myths about divine teachers like Quetzalcoatl began to evolve within the specific cultural contexts of ancient Mesoamerican civilizations. The first evidence of Quetzalcoatl as a deity can be traced back to the early Olmec civilization, circa 1500 to 400 BC. But it became central to the mythos of later civilizations, such as the Toltecs and the Aztecs. These civilizations, which reached their zenith between AD 900 to 1500, maintained a belief in Quetzalcoatl as a divine teacher who would return to bring spiritual redemption. Interestingly, some people claim that when the Spanish arrived in the Americas in the early 16th century, some indigenous peoples, notably the Aztecs, believed that Hernán Cortés, whom they encountered in 1519, was the returning Quetzalcoatl. This convergence of myth and historical events suggests that the figure of Quetzalcoatl was deeply ingrained in the collective spiritual consciousness of the Americas, long before the arrival of Christianity. It is during this time, and especially after the Spanish conquest, that these indigenous stories began to intertwine with Christian concepts, leading to a syncretic blending of ideas. The possibility of Jesus Christ's presence in the Americas, as depicted in the Book of Mormon, began to merge with indigenous expectations of a divine teacher. What if the teachings of Jesus and those of indigenous spiritual figures across the Americas aren't as different as we think? Could there be deeper, universal truths connecting them? The teachings of Jesus and those of indigenous spiritual figures across the Americas share remarkable similarities. These lessons of love, compassion, and harmony echo throughout history, blossoming into the foundation of the spiritual development of mankind. One of the most profound and transformative themes of Jesus' teachings is love, a love that encompasses neighbors, enemies, and God alike. His message of unity, forgiveness, and personal sacrifice resonates deeply with the principles found in indigenous wisdom and the teachings attributed to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Jesus urged his followers to love your neighbor as yourself, as stated in Mark 12:31, advocating compassion and selflessness, while Quetzalcoatl taught the virtues of kindness, respect for others, and harmony within the community. Both figures emphasize collective well-being as the foundation of spiritual and social life. Both the teachings of Jesus and indigenous beliefs stress the reverence for nature as sacred and divine. Jesus spoke often of nature, using it as a symbol for spiritual truths. In parallel, indigenous traditions universally view the earth as a living entity to be respected and cared for. This reverence is found not only in the Mayan, Aztec, and Incan civilizations, but in the many tribes across the Americas who view the land as sacred and full of life force, much like the spirit-filled teachings of Christ. How do the shared symbols and archetypes between Christian and indigenous traditions reveal deeper truths? And what can these overlapping motifs teach us about cultural interconnectedness and spirituality? The cross is one of the most universally recognized symbols of Christianity. Interestingly, similar cross-like designs can be found in indigenous art and carvings across the Americas. These cross-like symbols, often depicted as a central axis connecting the heavens and the earth, reflect the archetypal motif of the divine connection between the spiritual and material worlds. In addition to the cross, the sun and light are prominent symbols of divinity in both Christian and indigenous traditions. In Christianity, Jesus is referred to as the light of the world, while many indigenous cultures view the sun as a direct manifestation of divine power. These symbols, light, the sun, and the cross, are powerful representations of spiritual illumination, unity, and divine presence across cultures. The existence of Jesus is described in the Holy Book of Christians as one filled with great meaning, including his birth, his mission, and death. However, there remains a mysterious gap, a span of years from ages 12 to 30, often referred to as the lost years. these years are scarcely mentioned in biblical texts, leaving scholars, theologians, and seekers of truth to wonder, what did Jesus do during these formative years? Could they hold the key to his travels, possibly even to a journey to the Americas? This has left room for lots of possibilities in these years. Some suggest Jesus could have visited other countries, such as the Orient, and interacted with the people of other nations. Some people have suggested that he even traveled to the Americas, where he would return as the Christ figure mentioned in the Book of Mormon. While there is no direct historical evidence to confirm these theories, the absence of records in the biblical timeline offers a canvas on which such speculations are painted. The gaps in the historical record of Jesus' life are not unique. Across many ancient cultures, we find similar instances of key figures whose early lives are shrouded in mystery. Whether it be the mythological figures of Quetzalcoatl or other divine teachers, the absence of concrete historical data often adds to their allure and mystery. A global spiritual awakening in the same era. What is striking when we look at these parallel spiritual traditions is the synchronicity they share. Whether in the Americas, Asia, or Europe, the ancient world seems to have witnessed a profound spiritual awakening during the time that overlaps with Jesus' lost years. These spiritual figures, Jesus, Quetzalcoatl, and others, came not in isolation, but as part of a greater global cycle of divine teaching. It is from roughly 600 BC to AD 30 that this world served as a backdrop for spiritual change. In the East, new philosophical and ethical teachings emerged from the teachers Buddha and Confucius. In the Mediterranean world, Greek philosophers, for example, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, profoundly influenced emerging conceptions of divinity and virtue. Their seminal ideas reshaped morality, positing a rational foundation for ethics that diminished theocracy's role. Simultaneously in the Americas, visionary leaders like Quetzalcoatl laid philosophical groundwork for a spiritual transformation, establishing precedents of compassion and humanism that would reverberate for centuries. Today, the myths of Quetzalcoatl and other Christ-like figures from indigenous religions continue to inspire artists, novelists, and spiritual seekers all over the world. Such reappearances in literature, films, and art have historically linked Christ to native gods. The fact that these are still in use today demonstrates the relevance of their messages in potentially sparking interfaith dialogue and cross-cultural understanding. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can continue exploring universal truths that unite us all.